The issue of likely what you're seeing right now, if you're falling into certain patterns of addiction, is that if you were to look at what brings you joy in your life, fewer and fewer things are starting to meet those needs.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Gabby Rosalie podcast, a platform devoted to expanding our lives by connecting to the wisdom of the collective. Through relatable discussions on topics like communication, connection, leadership, science, and spirituality, we offer revolutionary perspectives and practical tools for creating positive change, right here, right now. But I don't want this to be some stiff lecture hall-esque vibe, so we make it fun, raw, and real. With expert guests and relatable conversations, my goal is to inspire you to break through limitations and remember that it is possible to live a life you're excited to wake up to every day. Thank you for being here and enjoy the episode. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Gabby Rosalie podcast. I missed you guys. I missed yapping into this microphone. And today I have a guest who I'm sure we're going to be yapping off the walls. And I'm really, really, really excited to share his work and this conversation I have planned with you guys. I have actually been searching for someone in this department for a couple of months and calling someone in to have this conversation, which is going to be about ADHD. We're going to talk about dopamine. We're going to talk about dopamine addiction, what it actually takes to perform at your highest level without burning out, especially for entrepreneurs, creatives, and high performers who feel like their brain is both their greatest asset and their biggest obstacle. And I finally found one. But actually, he found me. I checked my LinkedIn messages and he had actually asked if I was looking for podcast guests, and now we're here. So Ian Mai is our guest today. He is an ADHD-informed performance coach with 12 years of experience in startups and consulting. After leaving corporate, he's coached hundreds of ADHD professionals to create more consistent focus and follow through without burnout. He shares openly on LinkedIn about his personal struggles with unmanaged ADHD, addiction, and nervous system dysregulation.
What's really interesting about my own ADHD experience and even the people that I work with is that oftentimes ADHD is perceived as being just for people who struggle to focus or can't focus or really aren't that successful. And quite frankly, ADHD does not determine whether you're going to be successful or not. I was, by all trophies and accolades and accounts, a high performer. Very much so. My nervous system was geared towards, I wanted to reach the pinnacle of what performance meant. And so going back even as a child, I was hyper focused on becoming a high school valedictorian. Like I wrote a letter to myself when I was in the second grade of, I'm going to be a high school valedictorian. And I wrote this letter to my graduating self and I opened it up and I had all these goals that I wrote down and I hit every single one of them. And of course, my second grade self, or maybe it was fourth grade self, irrelevant, but ADHD, still was motivated even by like having an attractive girlfriend, like silly things, but also being a valedictorian, being a 4-year letterman in sports. And I had all of those accolades. And so what's interesting is that in high school, nobody would have ever looked at my patterns of behavior and thought ADHD. Going into college, like I think that's when more things started to become more aware of my inability to focus. I was self-medicating. I was using alcohol as part of my study habits and practices, which is interesting. Of part of the reason why even alcohol and marijuana can often be used by ADHD is really the dopamine effects that it can have, how it diminishes the amygdala and some of those patterns, which we can talk about. But going into my professional life in tech sales, there was a lot of opportunity in those tech sales environments to ring the bell, that dopamine bell, frequently and often. And the roles that I did really well at were the ones where there was lots of opportunities to see small successes frequently. Every single month, closing deals, end of quarter, big pushes, and having this ability to just like lock in real time and just put the blinders on was something that I excelled at. Over time, though, the problem is that, as you can imagine, your nervous system can't push at that level constantly. And it's not just the output that matters, it's what's fueling the output as well. And for me, there was a lot of insecurity that I had about my ability, my intelligence, about appearing, strong and capable, and had all of these very external metrics for success, that it was fear and anxiety and worry that was driving this output. And so it's not to say that the output is the issue. It's typically what's fueling it that's really causing all these problems. So in my mid to late 20s, as I started to see more of my ADHD patterns get worse and worse and worse, and my ability to show up for my role was continuing to degrade.
So at that point, Ian, did you know Had you received a diagnosis yet, ADHD,
I
or did
thought
you know
I
that
was
yet?
manipulating the system to try to get some medication. Like I was treating it like a performance enhancing drug. Wasn't even thinking that like I actually struggle with ADHD. I very much was thinking like, hey, if I get some Adderall, I can push even harder. How amazing would that be? We're over prescribing, but also underdiagnosing ADHD. And I think those two things combined can create a lot of problems. But for me at the time when I was getting this diagnosis, I thought I was manipulating the system. When in reality, it was like I was masking from a masking place, but still needed some help. The type of help that I needed, though, wasn't necessarily more dopamine, wasn't necessarily more norepinephrine and the chemicals I was getting from the meds. But so I think for me, what ended up happening is that even though I got that diagnosis, it wasn't probably even 5 years later that I finally had this rock bottom moment of all of my unmanaged ADHD experiences were leading into these huge amounts of addiction. And so for me personally, I have talked about this publicly. It really came down to my internet addictions that led to like pornography addiction and cyber sex, heavily using of alcohol, and then impulsive spending. Like I was that guy that was maxing out credit cards. I even paid off a bunch of debt using a home equity line of credit and then tried to shuttle funds into some different, leverage vehicles that I thought were doing well, getting to the point where I was in $60,000 worth of debt against my house, while also having all of these other things coming to a head. And so it's interesting. This was about 5 years ago that I was going through this extreme burnout, and I was trying to use all these tools to just keep this party going, keep this ship afloat, but wasn't doing it in any effective way, and didn't have not a lot of peers or even a lot of mentors who were leaning in and being able to say, hey dude, like this is a problem. Like this isn't healthy. Because on the outside looking in, I did everything I could to appear like I had it together. I wanted you to think, oh, Ian's super disciplined because look, he was a competitive bodybuilder while being President's Club sales rep, while getting married to this beautiful woman, while getting pregnant and having our first child. Like I wanted to have this appearance of having it all together. It was held together by, bubble gum and shoestring. And when I finally reached that rock bottom point, it was very evident that I needed to tackle, for me at the time, I still wasn't even thinking I was tackling ADHD. I thought I was just navigating addiction. It was only even 2 years after that journey that I was like, wait a second, this is part of the ADHD experience. And even it was as I started coaching others, helping them come out of their own addiction patterns, that I was noticing almost every single person I was engaging with, ADHD, on meds, ADHD, coming off meds, ADHD, thinking about meds. That's really where my own work as a performance coach with ADHD-informed approach started to really come to light.
So much to unpack there. And I know that you said, oh, okay, maybe we want to talk a little bit more about the dopamine addiction and kind of the chemicals in the brain and all of those fun things. But I am feeling the pull to kind of like going back to when you were young and in that industry, coming off of your high performer, valedictorian in high school, achieving all of these goals, and then transitioning into this ring the bell all the time, dopamine constantly, achieve small goals, sales industry. What were some of the warning signs that you would now, like current Ian would have gone back and told past Ian, okay, at this point in your career, I want you to be on the lookout for X, Y, and Z, because this might be a red flag to say, hey, you could probably catch this earlier than I did.
Yeah, it would have been more related to the community and peers that he was associated with. That if I could go back and have a conversation of, hey, let's talk about who your closest inner circle is and their patterns, and not just being able to say like, hey, let's diagnose where they're at, but more so of what type of friendships are they? What type of connections are they? How are those inner circle of people? What are they celebrating? What are they reinforcing? And what was noticeable, and this is even amongst my groomsmen at my wedding, of these weren't necessarily people who were celebrating the same things that morally, based on values, we're celebrating the same things that I wanted to see more of in my life. And so a good part of it really came down to of being able to see like, who are your mentors? Who are you looking up to at the time? And then being able to point out like, hey, do you really want to be that same person? Are you really emulating yourself? Are you discipling yourself after that person? And is that useful? And so there was a lot of, interesting enough, the people I was surrounding myself with were people I was trying to compete with. just constantly looking for this hierarchy of dominance and success and all of these metrics. And there really wasn't a lot of camaraderie and connection and community and really like people who were leaning into the internal work, who were celebrating some of these bigger emotional skills.
That's really interesting. And I think that that's a deep, inquisitive approach that is really humbling to take with yourself, to ask, where might I be in competition where I could be in community? That is, definitely something to sit with, and not to like come at it from a point of shame or guilt, but just noticing, because I'm curious how this idea of being in competition and wanting to ring the bell and wanting to prove yourself, because then if you're not aware of it, then it might, develop into some of these self-medicating things that you mentioned, which we're definitely going to talk about.
If I start acting and operating as if I'm trying to help somebody diagnose themselves, one, I'm not a clinician. It's not my field. But also digging more into the dysregulation pattern of it, because I think that's something that's worth digging into. And you even brought up this question of, what does curiosity look like? How can I look at my own behavior and patterns from this emotionally neutral place? That would actually be the first thing that I would start with. So for anybody who feels like they are holding very tightly to every single one of their behaviors, and they're identifying with them. And so that might very well be of like, oh, I'm just a really passionate person, justifying emotional intensity. Oh, I'm just really competitive, right? And anytime I think that we start to have these really strong identity associations with our behaviors, and our unwillingness to be able to say, hey, any of that is mutable. I can change any of these behaviors, any of these patterns. I can come in and kind of look at all these with a fine-tooth comb and then be able to decide what's serving me and what's not. I think more often than not, for people who are really struggling with potentially unmanaged ADHD, potentially, but also some of these addictive patterns, is you are very likely holding on with tooth and nail, justifying every single one of your dopamine sources that you're getting. Whether they're short, whether they're long-term, whether you're likely going to have some kind of over-justification of their use. And I think that's where people should start looking at that. And if you're unable to have that neutral, objective perspective, that's already an indicator that you're probably deeper in that hole than you realize.
I'm glad you made that distinction of not wanting to have this be a self-diagnosing episode where it's like, ooh, I do these things, I have ADHD. I don't want to fall into that either. In fact, I'm curious from your perspective, why do you think that's dangerous?
When you get a diagnosis and you do get on medication, is that medication can actually have really significant negative impacts. And so if you just immediately assume, oh, I have ADHD, so I'm going to go get medicated as quickly as possible. If you have other types of mania, schizophrenia, bipolar, borderline personality, just getting on stimulants can potentially be the worst thing for you. And all of a sudden you have other downstream effects, suicidal ideations, self-harm. If you talk about impulsivity being an issue and you all of a sudden give dopamine and fuel to that impulsivity, some of the worst case scenarios can happen. And so part of the reason why we have to play this fine line of like, hey, I can't diagnose you and it's not appropriate for me to try. More so, the goal of it always is going to be, hey, very well might be that your brain isn't operating completely optimally because of a lack of dopamine to certain parts of the brain. Great. Would love to be able to have that conversation. I don't necessarily shame anybody for using medication. I sometimes use medication on really boring administrative days in my work. But more often than not, I'm doing my best to try to leverage natural, sustainable dopamine sources that allows me to be able to fuel my energy and intention a lot more effectively over the longest time horizon. Super cliche. Like all of that sounds super cliche. So anybody on the other side of this, if you're taking medication, you're like, well, screw this guy. And you're already checking out, and I see you and I hear you. But the other part of this though, to really dig into your question of this level of introspection, somebody who has ADHD, more than likely, if you're feeling some sense of shame and judgment or criticism from me right now, that by itself is already indicating that you have an overactive amygdala. I don't know you. You don't know me. I don't know your experience, your life, your story, anything about it. And if you're hearing shame, you're hearing judgment from me right now, already it would indicate that, hey, there's probably some work that we could do to help you develop some emotional resilience, develop some patterns and strategies that will help you be more objective and neutral in how you're showing up in the world.
I can see why you do what you do and why you've been called to the work, because I appreciate the level of neutrality that you're bringing to some of the emotions that might be coming up right now, to some of the habits or the patterns. You talk about your own. I think that that's really important when we're talking about something like this. We're talking about medication. We're talking about mental health. So beautiful to be able to possess that neutral kind of processing of what is coming up, not from a place of judgment, just like, hey, I see you, I hear you, it's normal, and can we look a little bit deeper? I really, really love that. And it's an approach that I think is so valuable from a coach, because oftentimes when we seek out mentors, we look for someone who is going to give us all the answers, or who's going to give us the roadmap, or tell us what the right way is, or tell us the exact symptoms that we need to identify, or the patterns in us that are going to say we have ADHD, so we can slap a label or a diagnosis on something to like give us that sense of relief because we've figured it out. We found an answer. As human beings, we don't love being in the unknown, but we can always nurture that relationship that we have with the unknown. But I think as a coach, it's so important to urge those that you work with and are leading and guiding to a deeper place of, curiosity. So I really like that, and neutrality as well. So with the ADHD, this is still a part of this conversation, but I want to break down the addiction piece a little bit more here, because I think that this is one of the most dangerous and unaddressed issues in our society right now. Like, addiction is, maybe it's just because there's more information and it's like the overflow of over-connectivity, but I feel like it's very pervasive, especially for high performers and the younger generation right now. You mentioned pornography, you mentioned cyber sex, we're talking about social media, we're talking about alcohol, but can you talk about what that looked like for you, and kind of about this generation and maybe the age that we're living in, how all of the sources that we have to potentially become addicted to when we're not aware of what's going on in the brain, and how dopamine plays a role there?
The effects that you're talking about, the difficulty that people have is they think that an addiction has to have some level of amoral, that is somehow a problem. And so what's interesting about just dopamine in general, there's a lot of misunderstandings about it, because we associate dopamine with hedonism and pleasure seeking. And I've even talking about my own addictions of, pornography addiction and cybersex and internet addiction. Oh man, there is a lot of moral judgment to pass on that. I receive all of it, by all means. Like I'm sharing that so you can hear from me directly, to be able to say, there is nothing that you can do and to have been addicted to that I don't believe that you can come out of and be a better person for. And I serve people from this place, and you called it a calling. I very much so feel this perspective on my life that people will be served by me sharing this. So if you're angry, if you're bitter, somebody did this to you, I see you again. The other part of this, though, is that where we get this dopamine doesn't necessarily have to be good or bad. Right. And so we put a lot of moral judgment on it. Social media dopamine, bad. Pizza dopamine, bad. Shame. We create a lot of that. Ultimately, though, dopamine is not good or bad. It's really just whether the source that you're getting it from, how easy is it for it to be, or how accessible is it? How readily available is it? And then as a result, what ends up happening is, how much does it actually drop us below baseline after we use it, after we imbibe it? And so ultimately, that's the bigger issue, is it's kind of like a siphon. If you're familiar with how a siphon works, siphon requires you to go above a certain level of baseline, and then after it goes above that level of baseline, it plummets well below baseline. That's the bigger issue. And so oftentimes when we talk about addiction, it's that usually what ends up happening is that fewer and fewer different types of activities give us the same sense of contentment, peace, calm, clarity, and just this serene presence compared to the one addiction, compared to the one thing. And so it honestly ends up becoming this like funnel of, now the things that used to bring us joy no longer do, because only this one addiction is the thing that my brain has been reinforced to believe, trust, and affirm for my sense of self. And so, I mean, quite frankly, I talked about how a large part of my identity was in masculine pursuits, right? Bodybuilding, tech sales bro, trying to, I had 4 different motorcycles in my 20s. I was doing a lot of things to appear as masculine as possible. And so honestly, like part of the issue was that like this avenue for cybersex was a way to get this affirmation that I was seeking constantly. And because of that funnel, because I was so, like diminishing the ways that I could experience joy outside of this one tiny little avenue, that was affecting my ability to show up and care about the work that I was doing. Show up and care about being the best version of myself for my wife, for my kid.
Wow.
I'm sure there's a lot of questions about how did my marriage even get salvaged? That is a beautiful story. I would love to share it with you. It's probably outside of the scope of this conversation, but ultimately when it comes to addiction is that you really do need to surround yourself with at least one person who believes that you're capable of getting out of it. That's who my wife was to me. And the beauty of my story is that she and I are more madly in love than ever. But there was a pretty hard conversation that she had to have, being like, you got to sort this out. I believe that you're capable of it, but I need to see you willing to fight. All that to be said is that if you're in that place right now, I see you again, there's a lot of resources out to help you. The issue of likely what you're seeing right now, if you're falling into certain patterns of addiction, is that if you were to look at what brings you joy in your life, fewer and fewer things are starting to meet those needs. The justifications for those few things are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if I were to tell you they're not serving you anymore, wow, how viscerally are you responding to that? How defensive are you getting over it? Whether that's alcohol, oh, I'm just a social drinker. Okay. Tell me more. Is it marijuana? I just smoke a little bit to relax in the evening. Okay. Is it nicotine? What is it? Right. And I'm using these big ones, but it can be small things too. Right. And that's part of it, of like the way our brains are set up is for safety. It's not just pleasure all the time. It's also safety. How you experience that sense of safety can be manipulated, and your brain can over justify it to the point where it stops becoming useful and necessary.
As I've become a lot more aware, and then I went way too deep into the awareness where I was always like a third-party observer of every conversation I was having, to the point that I'm not even present in the conversation, to like pulling back on the awareness, to just being like free, but then, kind of now calibrating, like, okay, what is a healthy level of awareness? But noticing the conversations that we're having in our heads about the conversation that we're having right now. And if you're listening to this, noticing the conversation in your head that you're having as you're listening to Ian and I's conversation, because there's resource in that. And if you can develop a non-judgmental, acute awareness of your thought patterns, then you get to break that loop and you get to come at it from a place of compassion, if you so choose to, because at the end of the day, it is a choice. And I don't mean to say that it's easy and you just go ahead and snap your fingers and all of a sudden you don't ever have shameful thoughts again. But that has been one of the most transformational things that I have had coaches and, teams help build into me, is when you notice the conversations that you're having about the conversations you're having in your head, there's so much resource in that. So just notice. Now, we talked a little bit about nervous system dysregulation in the beginning of this episode. So I remember you mentioning there was a term that you used, nervous system readiness. So I want to talk about that, because we hear a lot about like regulate your nervous system, and or oh, I'm dysregulated right now. And the reason I'm using this like kind of up in the sky, like, airy way of saying that is because we say these things, but we don't oftentimes break it down to like really grab the meaning and the meat and potatoes of what that is.
I can't live in the nebulae of just cliches, and neither can your audience, right? They're just like, hey, I'm tired of the cliche. As soon as you say this cliche, brain shuts off and I'm not here anymore. I'm in my own head thinking of all the other things. So when I talk about nervous system regulation, I'm very much so talking about the visceral experience of it. So the way that I categorize that is very much so heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol, adrenaline. I can start to create even some awareness around when those things are happening, right? And even when I first get on stage, there's some shakiness in my hands, there's some tightness behind my jaw. Those are all signals of too much adrenaline. Okay, there's some nervous system readiness that I can have practiced and rehearsed. What do I do when I have excess adrenaline? How do I navigate that? I have developed those skills so that in real time, I can notice, Talked about noticing. Can't do anything until I notice. So first I have to notice. And now that I'm noticing, what are the practices and habits that I can regulate adrenaline? That's one of them, right? We can talk about the details of it, but it might very well be me just kind of going in the back room and going, bouncing and dissipating that adrenaline. It doesn't mean, it doesn't have to mean that the trigger for the adrenaline goes away. It doesn't have to mean that the trigger for the cortisol goes away. It's just my ability to notice those particular visceral experiences. For somebody with ADHD, there's actually a high likelihood that you struggle with that interoception, the awareness of what's happening in your body. And for a lot of my ADHD listeners, what they'll resonate with is they'll get stuck in a pattern of hyperfocus. And then as soon as they're like, oh shoot, that meeting started 2 minutes ago, I haven't grabbed a drink in 3 hours. I haven't gone to the bathroom in 6 hours. And now all of a sudden I have all these things that I have to go do because I did not have the physical visceral awareness of what was happening in my body. That same thing, as trivial as it sounds for the bladder, also happens with the cortisol, the adrenaline, the blood pressure, the heart rate. And so some of the things that we can do is even just notice some of those visceral experiences. When I am feeling heightened emotions, anxiety, fear, worry, stress, I'm ruminating, I'm catastrophizing. Some of the best skills you can develop, if I can't pinpoint the story that I'm telling myself about the situation or the circumstances, I can notice more of that visceral response. That's also more of the things related to the heart, the thyroid, some of those components. But when it comes to the neurochemicals, the dopamine, the norepinephrine, one of the things that's interesting that I bring up my high school experience around being a hyper performer, but also being an athlete, was that some of the times when I was the most regulated in my life, had the most focus, most continuity of train of thought and thinking, why I was so successful in high school and academia and in sports, was because of the fact that I was so physically active. That when you are performing in athletics, when you're going to the gym, when you're training, when you're running, your body is actually releasing a huge amount of dopamine, norepinephrine, and blood flow to the frontal lobe. All the things that you are treating the ADHD experience with. And so part of this nervous system readiness is that I need to, in real time, notice when my frontal lobe is shutting off to a task. I feel numb or apathetic. Part of my brain saying, hey, you need to go reach out to 100 clients if you're going to try to build this business that you have, right? That's part of the business. You work for yourself. This is the process. If my brain is shutting off to it and I'm just feeling numb and apathetic to it, I might have to, in real time, practice a strategy that helps me mobilize the dopamine, norepinephrine, and blood flow to the frontal lobe in real time. I might have to notice what the stories are about the ruminating, catastrophizing. Sure, right? I have to diminish the visceral intensity of that fight or flight response. But some of it might also be of how do I move my body through it? And having practiced that when the stakes aren't as high. Part of the problem that most people have is they think that when you're in the Super Bowl, you're just going to show up. In this moment right now, when I'm about to hop on the call, I'm about to give the presentation, that is not the time to be practicing your breath work. That is not the time to be practicing these routines. So you and I, we could do some breath work right now to calm the nervous system and to create some calm in our body. But your anxiety is probably a 2 out of 10 right now. Mine's probably a 3 because I'm being grilled by these intense questions. But great, we breathe and we calm our bodies and we're to a 1.5 when we were at a 3. I didn't train my body anything. I didn't practice and rehearse calming my nervous system when my nervous system's at a 6 or 7 out of 10. So part of the reason why I look at nervous system readiness from the lens of physical activity is I can recreate the heightened amygdala response in these moments through exercise, through intensity training, and I can practice and visualize those particular cues and triggers when I'm about to step on stage and give a presentation, when I'm about to go into that interview, when I'm about to sit down and crank out 100 cold calls. I can practice that. I can practice what's happening in my body, noticing, clarifying what the visceral response is, and then having practice calming my nervous system when the amygdala is actually active and it's really high. That repeated action and practice, I can now go take into these real moments. And this is where my tech sales bro history with the cold plunges and the Wim Hof breathing and all that stuff, people are going to listen and be like, man, back to the cliches. This is all BS. Yes, and. Right? And if you look at me now and you think, super douchey sales bro and he's just doing his usual sales bro thing, and now he just has fancy technical terms to communicate why it was so effective in the first place, you're missing it. You're genuinely missing it. The part that's beautiful of all this is now let's build the habits and practices that increases the likelihood that you actually practice these skills. Because you frontal lobe know them already. You know them. Great. Your audience knows this. And so they're probably been like, yeah, I know this already. How do I increase the likelihood of the focus and follow through for those activities that are going to prepare me for the big moments and the big things? That's where it all matters. And so those are the hacks that really help align us. And you can look at all the books, the Atomic Habits and the habit stacking and, aligning motivation with dopamine or short little bursts of it. And great. All of that's really useful. But quite frankly, if you don't employ any of those because you're getting stuck behind cliche and your nervous system's shutting off and you're feeling a sense of apathy about doing it, then none of those cliches are going to be useful to you. I'll get off my soapbox for a bit, but that's the work.
No, it's so good. So I want to make it as easy to apply as possible for someone who just listened to the soapbox and was like, yes, this is me. Okay, this is me. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do to stop this loop?
Because the problem that most people have is when they have that intrusive thought that's kind of negative and demeaning and catastrophizing, they're like, no, you can't think like that. You got to stay positive. And they think that that's going to be the thing that's all going to flip that switch. The opposite is true. It's just the amygdala fighting with itself. And so you talked about noticing and giving grace. The best thing you can actually do is thanking your brain. Hey, thanks, brain, for reminding me that this presentation could fully fall flat on my face. Hey, thanks for reminding me. I know you're trying to keep me safe. So this is called hemispherical lateralization. So typically the right hemisphere of the brain is more creative, visual, big ideas part of your brain. It's also usually the part of the brain that the ruminating and catastrophizing in lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, is happening. Our thoughts typically happen on that side of the brain. And so us just thinking this thing isn't as effective as hearing yourself say, ooh, I'm noticing. Even if it's under your breath. Oh, okay. I'm noticing the spiral. Oh, I'm noticing the self-degrading story. Yes. Oh, I'm noticing the I'm not good enough story. Oh, I'm noticing the I'm too much for people story. Big exhale, right? But if you're at a point where your nervous system still is like, hey, I'm not ready to calm down yet, then don't. Yes. And so here's the part that for me, what I like to practice is essentially doing almost the equivalent of like a Wim Hof breathing routine, where instead of doing the calming exhale, I'll do the opposite. I'll exasperate my breathing. I'll 1 second in, 1 second out. I'll pound my chest. I'll throw my hands around. I'll pace back here behind my desk for a second. What I'm actually doing is I'm not telling my amygdala to calm down, because who's ever calmed down from hearing, hey, calm down. Hey, relax, take a breath. Not me. Tell me to calm down.
No, not
right?
me.
And but so
not
all that's
me.
happening in your head. And so one of the most beautiful things that you can do is you can tell your amygdala, fine, let's go. Let's go into the fight. So for 30 seconds, I'm just going to pace back here and I'm going to peep my chest and I'm going to, and then even inside of 30 to 60 seconds, I can then ground myself. And for me, like I feel a lot of my tension and I like tapping on my collarbone. There's lymph nodes in there. There's lymph nodes in your armpit. You can, depending on what's most real for you, finding a way to be able to direct your attention to grounding something. When your amygdala is really active, the hippocampus part of your brain is kind of the thing that's trying to create some type of an awareness of where the attack is happening. So it's giving context to the amygdala. The amygdala is just alarm bells. It's just sending signals. The hippocampus is actually the guards who are going and shining a flashlight on that tripwire that was caused. But the benefit of this is when we tap on something on our body, we're actually giving the hippocampus something to direct the attention to. So then as we are calming our breathing, now that we've let the amygdala have its moment, we have the ability now, the benefit of moving our body like that, blood flow, dopamine, norepinephrine, all to the frontal lobe. Now my frontal lobe is starting to be able to have one hand on the wheel again. That frontal lobe is logical, has more executive reasoning. Hey, thanks, brain, for reminding me. Big exhale.
This is just making so much sense. Like, so much sense right now. And I just, in my brain, so many things are clicking. And I know that there are so many people that are listening to this right now that are like, whoa. And, you know, I've had a lot of guests on the show, and I myself have had many conversations with me, myself, and I about the somatic approach, the frontal lobe approach, bridging that gap. Like, okay, how do we know when to use one and when to use the other, and when to play around and when to, you know, use both? But I think that the way that you described it gave an opportunity for very logical people, or maybe people who are like very skeptical of the word somatic or energy or anything like that. Like, totally hear you, been there in that skeptical chair. But also for the people who know what it means to regulate your nervous system, or to, I don't know, move that stagnant energy through your body and let the emotions be felt. I feel like what you said about let the amygdala have its moment, because what that clicked in my head is like, in a way, we talk about the inner child, we talk about reparenting yourself, we talk about like nurturing all of the areas of the brain and not shaming, and we don't want to fall into this cycle of guilt. But like, in that moment of letting your amygdala have its moment, you're also allowing your emotions to be processed. You're also not falling into this guilt and this shame about what's going on. It's like, okay, let's let you, just like a parent with a toddler is like, let's go ahead and take your best shot at it, and we'll see how it turns out, even though the parent knows that it's probably not going to, you know, amount to anything. But it's like, well, we'll try it. Okay, great. And then you can kind of build independence, you build self-trust. And so I just feel like that clicked so much. And even the idea of saying like, yeah, run around a little bit. Don't try to calm down. Don't tell yourself to calm down, because that is the number one thing that I've struggled with the most in my life, is like, no, you're actually not supposed to have a regulated nervous system all the time, because we have these brain cues for reasons. And so it's like, sometimes you got to let that brain cue run its course. And then you can be like, oh, wait, now I have the blood in the frontal lobe to say, let's make this conscious decision.
Yeah. And one thing that's interesting is my nervous system continues to trust me all the more, because there's no part of my emotional experience, my visceral experience, that I'm afraid to have. And so when that emotion, frustration, comes up, I'm not telling the child, hey, go back to your closet, kid. Because inevitably that child is going to keep acting out that emotion. If I could give a character to that emotion, like, he's going to be tired of being told to calm down all the time. Hey, I'm actually trying to help. Hey, I'm here for a reason. I don't trust that you're going to give me the light that I actually deserve. And so even just having that little, it can be 30 to 60 seconds. What's interesting is that, again, if I were to be tech sales bro, be like, you got to pound your chest and you got to ooh-rah. Brain just goes, oh, fuck, screw this guy. Like, what an idiot. Does he hear himself right now? But when I tell you, hey, maybe it might be worth you not belittling the emotion that's coming up right now. Maybe if you actually leaned into it and did some intense breathing. Now, this isn't anger. I'm not fighting some, you know, external force. It's very much just intensity for the sake of it. The problem is that most people would confuse that chest pounding aggression as like anger, and that's not safe for them. They're like, 6 foot, 240 pound dude. No, I don't want any of that intensity. I'm shutting off to that. That's not safe. But if you heard yourself being able to say, no, hey, this emotion deserves a moment. Maybe not this one moment in time right now. Maybe I don't have 30 minutes to process this and journal about it and reflect on it. And it's like, no, I got to get to the thing. I'm in the moment. 30 seconds of that intense breathing, another 30 to 60 seconds of that big, long exhale. That might be enough. And then I can sit and later on reflect more deeply, do more of that intense emotional journey of, hey, when was the first time I ever experienced this? What version of me was sitting there just now? Maybe it was that 8-year-old version of me who's a little tired of having his emotions being belittled. He was a little tired of being told he's too sensitive. Don't love that. I don't love hearing that from myself now. All of that, being able to create grace, kindness, and love for every single one of our emotions as if it were us. Again, it's a beautiful process and actually increases our ability to sit with and regulate more effectively. If there's an emotion that you're afraid of having or you don't allow yourself to have, those are the things that are likely causing you the most impulsivity, the most ADHD of your experiences when it comes to irrational, impulsive action and your ability to regulate. And I think for a lot of men, they'll appreciate this. They want to be seen as stoic and calm and trustworthy, and that there's a sense of just power in that. And so when they have that impulsivity, they actually feel very weak and mild and feel even more shame in that. I was labeled a sensitive guy for a long time. I cry a lot. I mean, I've cried probably like 3 times today. Zero shame about any of it. But the beauty of all of it is that I don't sit there in that space for very long because I've made so much space for the entirety of that emotional experience. That allows me to show up when I need it to. When I'm about to hit the stage, when I'm about to go give that executive board presentation, when I'm about to go present to Pepsi and this is going to be a $4 million contract and I need this to come through. Deeply love and accept myself. Right. And I think all of that requires practice, rehearsal, preparation, and all of those can be seen as skills for anybody who's just being like, cool, again, I know that. Are you practicing it? Are you rehearsing it? And not rehearsing all the ways the story or the interaction is going to go wrong, but are you rehearsing the nervous system state? That's where the practice is. It is not repeating that dumb thing that you said in front of a live audience. It's in the visceral experience of it all.
So much value. And I know that because you do this work with other high-performing individuals, and you're sharing this information with people who resonate, let's just put it that way. I know that you know the value of having someone help you hold that space or to help you see where you're getting in your own way from a coaching perspective and say like, okay, as your coach, sometimes I'm going to be kind, not nice, but I'm going to call you on your BS and I'm going to be like, hey, I'm noticing you in a loop right now. Let's talk about this. Or like, hey, I'm noticing a rise in your emotions right now. Like, what's going on? Like, let's break this down is so helpful. And I know that is an intellectualized or like verbal processing of your patterns or your thoughts or whatever it is. And I think that having someone hold that space in a container with you is very helpful because then you have more tools to use in this visceral approach to understanding. And so I love that is what you are bringing and the value that you're providing. And so as we wrap up this episode, I just want to give you an opportunity to direct anyone who's listening.
Website, ianmai.co, too lazy and cheap to buy the .com. But I am also continuing to do more workshops where I talk about this performance readiness strategy, where you can actually have real practical habits and strategies that can start small and can be grown over time. So this won't be live, but I have a session that's happening tomorrow. These people won't get to hear it, but if you're interested in the recording or you want to have more of that discussion for you and your team, feel free to reach out to me, Ian, I-A-N, at ianmai.co. And I'd love to have a conversation for what a workshop might look like for you and your team.
And I will definitely put that all in the episode description. So if you found value in this, please make sure to check Ian out. And I always love to hear the questions and suggestions that you guys have for future episodes. So please drop me an email or an Instagram message, a LinkedIn message as well. I hope you guys got some value. You might want to go back with a pen and paper and listen to this episode again. And just like Ian mentioned, there is a lot of value in understanding this from a frontal lobe perspective, but putting it into practice and giving your nervous system the opportunity to be set up for success. Readiness is so powerful. And the impact, yes, it's for your own mental health, but it's also for your relationships. It's for the example that you're leaving for your children and for those that look up to you, for your clients and for your teammates. And so yeah, this is it's such a ripple effect. And so Ian, thank you so much. And for all of you though, that are listening, we will see you next time. Hold up now, y'all. Before you head out, I need to say thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode, and most importantly, thank you for making the conscious decision to invest in yourself and expand your mind, heart, and spirit. Because you showed up for you, you are helping others live better lives. Whether you know it or not, you are inspiring others daily. And if you're feeling fired up, keep the domino effect alive and share this episode with someone that you love. If you're feeling extra saucy, leave the show a review because it really, really helps me out. And come back and hang with me again sometime. New episodes every other Monday at 8 a.m. Keep shining your unique light. I see you, and I love you.